Alrighty, with part two of this Unit 3 review. Again, I'm not going to go back over the definition ones, or I'm not going to write them down at least. But what we're looking at here with these returns to scale, it's not too different than the increasing and decreasing marginal returns. It's just now we're looking at it in the long run. And let's remember that the difference between the short run and long run in economics isn't an amount of time, it's whether we can change variables or not. In the short run, we can't, right? But in the long run, we can. So if I'm looking at Grandy's as an example here, right? In the short run, you know, they only had so many cash registers, so many ovens, so many grills, so many fryers, and they were just slammed every day, right? So they were just busy, line out the door. But in the long run, they were able to change those variables. They were able to build a new building, you know, expand their kitchen, get more ovens and grills and other resources. So in the long run, what we're looking at with this economies of scale, what we're thinking about here is like Sam's Club, right? That the bigger they get, the cheaper that they can produce, right? So bigger leading to more cost-effective techniques, right? You're doing things in scale. Constant returns to scale means that getting bigger isn't necessarily making you more or less productive. Diseconomies of scale is when you get too big to a point where it becomes difficult or unwieldy to manage. And if we look at Brunswick High, we're probably somewhere right around here, right? That as we get bigger as a school, we can share resources. We could share computer labs. We can share the cafeteria, the gym, whatever. And we're a pretty big school now. If we continue to grow, if we continue to get more students, then we're probably going to start to see this diseconomies of scale. It gets difficult for one person, Mr. Turner, to manage this big of a school. Even if you hire more assistant principals, it becomes more and more difficult. So when we're looking at these stages of returns, what we're seeing is something like this. We have our economies of scale, where our costs are going down as our output goes up. Then we see our constant returns to scale, where by adding more, our costs aren't really changing. And I'm going to put the average total cost here, and this is looking at the long run. And then we have our diseconomies of scale, where as we get bigger, it gets more and more difficult to produce. So this would be our diseconomies of scale. Again, this is us getting too big, too unwieldy, too difficult to manage, and then bigger is going to make it more complicated, more difficult to produce. Generally, we're looking at the short run, though, in economics. Another thing that we kind of struggled with from the midterm and from, you know, the first semester is the difference between accounting and economic profits. Accounting profit is just looking at the raw money, right? The money coming in, which is the revenue, and the money going out. That's our explicit costs. Explicit costs, again, are clearly stated. That's your electric bill, your labor costs, your resources, your tools. Economic profit, though, is looking at both the explicit as well as the implicit costs. The implicit are the unspoken things, your opportunity cost, your time, the other things that you're giving up, right? So in economics, we're looking at both of these, right? That when I was doing my doctorate, I thought about A, the money that I'm going to be making, B, the money that I'm going to have to spend on that doctorate, but C, the other things I'm going to have to give up by doing that doctorate, right? It cost me 4 years. I had to stop coaching soccer. My daughter came along and I had to give up, you know, some of the time with her, which I didn't love. And so when I was trying to make this decision, the economic profits is what I was really thinking about. And so that's where we get to this idea of normal profits, right? That if our economic profit is zero, then our normal profit's always going to be positive. And what I mean by that is, let's say that my revenue is $10, my explicit costs are $5, and my implicit costs are $5, right? So my economic profits right now are zero. I'm making 10, I'm spending 10, my profit's zero. All right, so if I'm looking at my economic profits being zero, my accounting profits are always going to be positive. Because if I ignore this implicit cost, and I'm just looking at the revenue minus the explicit, well, my accounting profits are positive, $5. So when we're looking at those perfect competitions and we say that they're not making any economic profits, they're making normal profits, like the owners are still making money, but there's no incentive for new businesses to enter into that market. So normal profit is when we have zero economic profits. All right, now let's look at this idea of profit maximizing. We've got our total costs here and our number of units. It's assuming that the price of each product is $100. Our profit maximizing rule, we use Mr. Mac. We go to where marginal revenue meets marginal cost. or the last point where marginal revenue is higher than marginal cost. All right, because that marginal revenue and that marginal cost, that word marginal, we're just looking at the next unit, right? I'm going to keep producing as long as that next unit is making me more than it's costing me. So if we're looking at that over here, right, I've got my number of units and I put down the marginal revenue. If each unit I can make $100 off of, well, that's going to be my marginal revenue. If I sell one unit, I'm going to make another $100. If I sell a second unit, I'll make an additional $100. If I sell a third unit, I'm going to make an additional $100. Now we can get our marginal cost from over here, right? Our marginal cost of no units is $100. The cost of this first unit, the marginal cost is going up by 100. If we're looking at the second unit, I'm spending an additional $40. That's my marginal cost. The third unit, I'm spending an additional $60. The fourth unit, I'm spending an additional $80. The fifth unit, I'm spending an additional $120. The sixth unit, I'm spending an additional $150. And then the seventh unit, I'm spending an additional $250. Now, if we're looking at this profit maximizing rule, where I'm going to make the most money, I'm going to use this Mr. Mac rule here, right? So ignore this for a second. If we go on to 2 units here, because it crosses that point twice, right? But my marginal cost is going down, so I'll keep producing. So if I produce 2 units, the second unit is going to cost me $40 and make me $100. I'm going to make a profit of $60 there. So that sounds good to me. The third unit is going to cost me $60 and make me $100. I'll make a $40 profit there. Cool. The fourth unit is going to cost me $80 and make me $100, so I'm going to make $20 there. I'm good with that. The fifth unit, though, is going to cost me $120 and it's going to make me $100. My marginal cost outweighs my marginal revenue. I'm not going to produce at 0.5. So that profit maximizing rule, my most profitable point would be 4 units, right? Because any more than that, I'm starting to lose money. Any less than that, and I'm leaving money on the table. If I stop at 3, I'm losing that $20 that I could make at 4 units. If I go on to 5, I'm spending $20 more than I'm making. Now, if I'm looking at my profit or loss at 5 units, we could see that, all right, at 4 units, I'm selling $100 a piece. So my total revenue is $400. We already know that my total cost at 4 units is $380. So it's costing me $380. My revenue is $400. My profit then would be $20. All right, next up. Our shutdown rule is that if our price is less than the average variable cost, then we shut down. And the reason for that, when you think of the average variable cost, think of like the ingredients to something, right? If I'm making a burger, that would be the labor costs, or the beef, or the cheese, or the bread, right? If the cost to make the burger, the materials is higher than the price I'm selling it for, there's no point in me producing it. So if the price is less than that average variable cost, I shut down. And again, when I say shut down, I don't mean close down for good. I mean I stop producing, right? So if I'm looking at Grandy's being open till 7, 8, 9, 10 o'clock, the average variable cost would be those hourly workers. So after a certain point, that boss or that manager is going to say, okay, I'm spending more than I'm making here. Maybe I can send some of these workers home and get my average variable cost lower than my price again. And so if we're looking at 2 here, the firm's short-run supply curve, we could look at this graph beneath here. It's anything higher than that average variable cost, right? Because as the price goes up, we're willing to produce more than we were before. So our short-run supply curve is when our marginal cost is higher than our average variable cost, right? So we wouldn't produce at $4, we wouldn't produce at $6, we wouldn't produce at $7, or we would produce at $7. We'd start at $7 and we'd go up from there. We'd produce at 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, all the way up. So this marginal cost curve would be our supply curve above the wherever the average variable cost is. Now, let's use the numbers here to kind of answer 3.7. All right, so the first thing it's asking us is our profit maximizing quantity. So again, here we're going to want to use Mr. Mac, right, where marginal revenue meets marginal cost. And if I'm looking at this perfect competition, let's remember that our demand curve is everything. We use this acronym Mr. DART. It's our marginal revenue, it's our demand curve, it's our average revenue, and it's our price, right? If our price is $10, think about it this way. Each unit I sell, I'll make an additional $10. It's my demand curve, right? I'm only selling this good at $10. It's my average revenue. If I sell 4 units at $10 a piece, that's $40. 40 divided by 4 is 10, right? So this demand curve is completely horizontal here. It's completely elastic. And that's because businesses in a perfect competition don't have any control over their prices. So if we're looking at Mr. Mac here, I'm going to see that marginal revenue and marginal cost meet each other at 20 units. That's my profit maximizing quantity. Next, let's look at the total revenue. I'm making 20 units, so that's my quantity. The revenue is the quantity times the price, right? I'm producing 20 units at $10 a piece, so my total revenue then is going to be $200. If I'm looking at my total cost, I'm producing 20 units still. I'm going to go up to this average total cost curve here. At 20 units, it looks like my average total cost is $8 a piece. So I'm going to do the quantity times the cost here, or times the average total cost. So the quantity is 20 units. The average total cost is $8 a unit. And so then my total cost is going to be $160. So again, if this price is higher than the average total cost, we're going to make a profit. My revenue is $200. My total cost is $160. So my economic profit is going to be $40. Now, in the short run, perfect competitions can make money, right? But a characteristic of perfect competitions is that there's low barriers to entry, meaning it's easy for businesses to enter and exit a market, right? That there's nothing to stop you from opening up your own stall at a farmer's market and selling your apples as well. Now, if I see that this business is making money, other firms are going to be incentivized to enter into the market. So the number of firms are going to increase, right? More firms are going to enter into that market because they want to make a cut of that profit as well. However, when they do that, it starts to drive down prices. As our supply of good increases, prices drop down. So assume the market reaches long-run equilibrium. What would be the price and the quantity? So think about it this way, right? Right now, the price of this good's $10. These firms are making a profit. Other firms want to enter into that market. So they would continue entering here. They would continue entering here. They continue entering all the way down until the point of this lowest average total cost. So that'd be $7. And the reason for that, I'll just label this D2. And the reason for that is because they're making a profit here. 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 But at this point, at $7, they'd no longer have an incentive to continue entering into the market. If any other firms entered into the market, they would start to make a loss. They would start to lose money. So if we're looking at the long run, in the long run, a perfect competition isn't going to make an economic profit. They're still making accounting profits, like we were talking about earlier, but that economic profit's going to be at the lowest point of the average total cost, because then firms don't have an incentive to enter or exit the market. So if we're looking at the long run equilibrium, the equilibrium price would be $7, and our quantity, our new profit maximizing point, or marginal revenue and marginal cost meet halfway between 12 and 16, let's call it 14 units. In the long run, would the firm earn economic profits, accounting profits, neither or both? So we already said that they're not making economic profits, right? Our average revenue is $14 a unit, and our average cost is $14 a unit. But we are making or accounting profits. When economic profits are at 0, our accounting profits are positive, because the accounting profits are just looking at the explicit, whereas the economic profits are looking at both the implicit and the explicit. And that's why the accounting profits are always going to be higher than the economic profits. And then finally, if the price was at $6, would the firm shut down in the short run? At $6, I don't think we can answer that, because we don't have the average variable cost, right? That we can lose money, but if our loss is less than the fixed cost, then we should still stay open, right? That I would rather stay open and lose less money than if I shut down and lost more money. All right, so that'll take us to that part right there, and then we've got one last little section of this. Thank you all for bearing with me.